think everybody underestimated the strength of ISIS, especially with all the weapons that they seized from Syrian army and Iraqi army. 5 Iraqi divisions melted away, and they just left their weapons, which fell into the hands of ISIS.
Weapons bought by American taxpayers were captured by ISIS as it paraded into cities that had been won by American troops.
While no one can lay claim to being the actual first person who coined or used the phrase, the best guess is it dates back to a piece of Sanskrit around the 4th century BC, with the first recorded English version being around 1884. It was very popular during World War II when the Allies were forced to deal with the Soviet Union in defeating Adolf Hitler. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Simple enough. Right back at the forefront of the latest war America finds itself in, against a band of desert-dwelling killers with a lot of money and a lot of misguided fervor. If you're going to kill those in the phony Islamic State, then you have to go after them in Syria. That means putting weapons and training in the hands of Syrian rebels, the enemy of the Syrian dictator. Let us dive in. Welcome back to MidPoint, former CIA analyst and now doing the job for LIGNET.com, where the top analysts provide real-time introspection on what happens around the world. Lisa Ruth joins us. Lisa, always a pleasure to see you again.
It's good to be here.
Here we go. Let's get started. 60 Minutes report on Sunday I thought was fascinating because if there was one thing that stuck out in it when Leon Panetta was talking and so many others, it's that the president knew every single person, from Hillary Clinton to his military leaders to everybody around him, said you must arm the Syrian rebels years ago, yet he still did not. How can anybody with that sort of a brain trust sitting around them, other than being just completely naive, not understand the need at that time?
Agreed. And the 60 Minutes show was very good last night because it laid out this was not just one sector saying you should do this and then countering people. I will say the problem with the Syrian rebels has always been the same thing. This is a group of very fractured, very disparate people, not very well organized. They fight among themselves. It's not very clear what they're doing. However, I'm going to take it back even farther. If our goal is to get Assad out, which is what we say, how many choices do you have? You have to arm the rebels. And now we're in a very difficult situation because the same problems exist. We really don't even know who these rebels are. We haven't taken the time to cultivate a group that we're going to support. So we're starting to pour weapons in. It's not a good policy now. I think it's too late, honestly, and I think that we're going to find ourselves helping Assad more than we want to admit because the rebels are going to be fighting ISIS instead of Assad.
I'm going to give you another old saying. Just throw it up against the wall and see if it sticks.
Yeah.
That would seem to be what America is doing right now because you said not organized. 2 words I just took from what you said. We can't seem to ever find anybody in that part of the world who is organized in the first place, so we are always throwing our money and our weapons after people who are just a scattered group of rebels.
Let me give you a scenario in the old days, what we would have done. At the point when it was very clear there was an opposition to Assad, and the United States said we want to get rid of Assad. Now, first of all, you have to have a policy, and I'm still not clear that we've articulated what exactly our foreign policy is. If that's the case, we would have gone in with a covert action program, frankly, and identified who this group is, who can lead this group, how can we help them, who's going to take over after Assad. Instead, what we did is we started throwing a little bit of training here, a little bit of weapons here. What I'm fearful of in Syria is we're going to have Libya. I mean, let's just pretend Assad goes away. What do you have left? You have the same power vacuum. If we want to get rid of Assad over time, it seems to me one option that nobody's really talking about is go to Assad now. What happens if we were to go to Assad and say, we'll help you. We will help you against ISIS, but in exchange, you have to be willing to have elections in 2 years, 5 years, and stop the fighting.
Stop making sense.
Sorry. It seems to me at the point when we articulate what our foreign policy is, we have more options. Until we articulate that foreign policy, we don't have these options.
Let me get a little bit of clarification from you because we always hear the phrase boots on the ground. You and I have never really talked about this, and I think the public needs to understand this. When we think about boots on the ground, most people think about full-blown military. We're talking about people who are ready to go, everything's packed, they're in there for war. Wait a minute, we're talking about the CIA here, we're talking about early groups. Aren't we talking more about those people who are not the full blown military, but people such as the CIA that needs to get in there. Those are the boots, but they do something very different than sitting there actually gun carrying at that point looking to kill people. There's a lot more there. I think that's what people need to understand here. The boots on the ground are CIA that needs to prepare for what we need to do. Again,
if you're operating with one eye closed, you're not going to be all that successful. Until we can have intelligence on the ground to really identify these groups. For example, we talk about moderate rebels. To me, and we're talking about moderate dictators. You know, it's amazing how when we decide that they're on our side, we're going to call them something else. I'm not sure we even know what we're dealing with. It's not clear to me. We say these are moderates, but as I think we mentioned on the show last week, these moderates sold the hostages to ISIS to then behead them. This is the moderates that we're supporting? You can't just say they're moderate because we decide we have to work with them. Until we can really get on the ground and look around and start helping the groups that have the same goals that we do, you're operating blind.
But does anybody there have the same goals that we have?
Well, look, let me ask you what our goals are, because again, let's articulate that. I believe if we want Assad out, we want the fighting to stop, there are ways we can do that. And sometimes you have to make really hard choices. Sometimes that choice has to be to say to Assad, Assad does not want ISIS. If we push ISIS back from Iraq, now think about this for a minute. Say we go in and bomb them back into Syria. Assad does not want a full ISIS contingent in Syria. So if we have leverage at this point, and this is a very alternative scenario, but if we have leverage and we go to Assad and say, ceasefire now, save these people, we want peace, you just want an election, hold out for 5 years, but you have to have a unity parliament. Otherwise, good luck on your own with ISIS.
What you just talked about is a great strategy. Don't look to kill ISIS, simply push them back into Syria, corral them, get them back in. Here, it's your problem and deal with it. But is that realistic? I mean, in any sense of the word.
Well, no, and the problem with ISIS...
What a great idea. I should be a strategist. We're going to start to work here.
Exactly. And the problem with ISIS really is their ability to adapt is amazing thus far. And at the point you push them back into Syria, you know, it's like those, you squish out the other sides. You know, I doubt they'll be very happy in Syria. They want Iraq. They want Jordan. They're talking about a lot of other places. And if we allow them to be inside of Syria, it allows them to regroup. But your point is valid. I still think the biggest problem with this administration is we need to clearly articulate our foreign policy goals, what it is we want, and then you can get a strategy. But as you said, when we start throwing things around, to me the idea of flooding a region already awash with weapons, with more weapons, without really vetting who they're going to or how this is going to work is because we need more fighting. That doesn't make sense.
90 seconds left. Let's talk about Articulation. Audio recording released on the social media website believed to be the voice of Islamic State spokesman Abu Muhammad al-Adnani al-Shami, telling the followers to attack citizens of the U.S. and other countries which have joined the coalition, destroy the militant group. If you can kill a disbelieving American or European, basically this goes on, rely on God, kill them in any manner you can. Isn't this, it's wonderful propaganda. We know this, don't we? We know these people. They're masters at using this sort of language here. So it's not as if this should shock us in any way, right?
They beheaded journalists and aid workers. Okay? You know, so the civilians are certainly within the people they're going after. This is not a game changer. As you said, it's very much rallying the troops, cheerleading, but it's what we already know about this group.
All right, so about minute that I have left here. What is happening now and what needs to be happening right now as far as the prep is concerned for this? Other than just basically being smart and trying to find. We're right back here again. I hate this when I ask this question because we're right back to the whole thing again. What is the aim? No one really knows. And the military isn't very happy with the president either right now. No one's on the same page.
Absolutely not. And in terms of military strategy, there is universal agreement we can't airstrike our way out of this. President says no boots on the ground. Does that mean we're willing not to defeat ISIS? Can we defeat ISIS? You know, I go back to we're going to have another strategy session because really here we are again with the current program we've got. We're basically saying ISIS can continue to operate in some form, some mutated guerrilla force or something else.
And there's already boots on the ground. people need to understand. And it is likely,
Absolutely.
very likely, CIA operatives who are already there, have been there, and are trying to find that intelligence that they can get right now. So we need to stop kidding ourselves.
Absolutely.
It's what it's. We're gonna create a show, and we're gonna do these answers and questions, and we're gonna repeat them every week and let the president hear them and see if somebody understands. I'm not sure they will. Lisa, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Lisa Ruth joining us from LIGNET.com. Check them out. The latest on what's happening around the world. Later this hour, another round of sign-ups scheduled for Obamacare, another round of potential disasters. It's all coming up right here on MidPoint.